Ah, the Colorado Wasteland. The perfect place to relax, do some shopping at the bazaar, or maybe some skiing in Aspen. All while fighting off the usual array of mutated animals, bandits, and robots. All this you can do in the weirdly fun world of Wasteland 3. Wasteland 3 came out in the fall of 2020 and is the third edition of the Wasteland series, a post-apocalyptic RPG setting that is almost as famous as the Fallout series setting. And indeed, it is none other than Brian Fargo, who is one of the brains behind the Wasteland games. He's one of the pioneers of the computer role-playing game genre, having worked on, Wasteland, The Bard's Tale, the Lord of the Rings RPGs that came out in the early 90s, and of course Fallout 1 and 2. I myself haven't played the first Wasteland game, even though I had it years back on a compilation CD-ROM, but I spent many hours in Arizona playing Wasteland 2. Wasteland 2, while far from a perfect game, was one of the RPGs that was responsible for rebooting the isometric RPG genre when it came out in 2014. Next to Divinity Original Sin and Pillars of Eternity, which were released at about the same time. I didn't have the time to play Wasteland 3 when it came out last year, but I made up for that this spring and summer, playing as much as I could. So let's take a look at Wasteland 3. Story and setting. Like Fallout, the Wasteland games are set in a post-apocalyptic world, decades or centuries even after World War III. There is a slight difference. In Fallout, the technology was set in a 1950s, 1960s loop. In Wasteland, World War III started in the late 80s, and it shows in the type of tech and weapons you can use. As usual, in Wasteland 3 you lead a squad of elite rangers. The Arizona Rangers are a faction dedicated to bringing back law and order. After the events of Wasteland 2, the Rangers are hanging on by a thread and in desperate need of a steady stream of supplies. And as it so happens, the ruler of neighboring Colorado, a charismatic man called the Patriarch, can offer those supplies for a price. The company of Rangers that is set to Colorado to work out this deal is ambushed, most members getting killed in a gruesome manner. Just 2 Rangers survive, and this is where your story picks up. You start with a party of 2, the surviving Rangers, but surely but slowly are working towards building a new elite group of Rangers in Colorado, base included. The Patriarch helps you with setting up your base, but sets a heavy price for his help. You need to find and capture, preferably alive, his 3 children. And boy, what a family. These are not the most sympathetic kind of kids. Colorado is a different world compared to the usual desert-like wastelands of most post-apocalyptic RPGs, being in a permanent nuclear winter. So you travel in a winter landscape all the time, and your characters are all clad in heavy winter gear. Besides it, you also can use snowballs as a weapon, and yes, yellow snowballs as well. A main red thread in the story is the difference between rich and poor, between haves and have-nots. On the surface, Colorado has successfully rebuilt the civilization, but most of the prosperity is in the hands of the Patriarch and a group of aristocrats called the 100 Families. Everyone below that has to make ends meet. Like any good RPG, Wasteland 3 has its share of weird, funny and at times sadistic set of factions. You have for instance a group of Ronald Reagan worshippers called the Gippers. A group of clown bandits that like to torture their neighbors by sending suicidal pigs armed with bomb vests. And of course robots. Now, such a game always is a tough setting where life is cheap. But Wasteland 3 has some of the most sadistic, psychotic set of antagonists in gaming history. At least in my experience. With many great antagonists in video games, you at least can understand their motives. But here you're dealing more with the some men just want to see the world burn kind of enemy. Overall, the story is pretty original compared to many other RPGs. It's not so much about trying to save the world from some great evil, but about survival and local politics. The quests in this game are pretty funny. They range from the typical fetch missions to getting a weird tenant out of an apartment building. There are some heartbreaking choices you have to make as well. In one instance, you either can save a merchant train from an ambush or save a family of farmers from murderous bandits. But you have to make a choice, you don't have the time to save them both. And there are plenty more of these kinds of dilemmas. Gameplay. Wasteland 3 is a typical isometric RPG with tactical combat. Most of the gameplay elements have been used in other similar games before, so on that front nothing new or original. But it's all executed quite well. Creating your characters, for instance, is a fun experience and pretty easy to master. With Wasteland 2 you had to do some research beforehand in order to create the best rangers. Here all the skills and stats look more logical. So if you want to start with a sniper, you know in which stats and skills you need to invest. Combat itself hasn't changed that much with regards to Wasteland 2. It's still turn-based tactical combat, very much in the same spirit as games like XCOM and Shadowrun. It may be my own personal experience, but the combat seems somewhat more challenging than was the case in its predecessor. Even random encounters can be quite difficult, with hits eating half of your character hit points in one bite. New is the way you travel on the world map. Early on you get access to an armored snowmobile in which your party travels around. This vehicle can be upgraded, both armor, engine, weapons and the horn. In random encounters and areas where there is access, your vehicle is a powerful ally that can blow enemies away with ease. Another improvement is the way your party deals with tasks like picking locks or dealing with traps. In the former game you had to pick the individual party member who had the skill to deal with a certain task each time. This could get pretty cumbersome, especially when there were multiple tasks to be done. Let's say for instance you had to crack a safe that had an electronic alarm and was booby-trapped as well. First you had to pick a character to disconnect the alarm, after that a character that could disarm the trap, and finally a character that could crack the safe itself. Now in Wasteland 3 automatically the character is picked that has the best skills to deal with each task. All in all, gameplay is a much better, much improved experience in this edition. Graphics. And the same goes for the graphics. Those are much improved as well. The graphics in Wasteland 2 weren't bad, but you kinda knew you were playing a Kickstarter game. In Wasteland 3 the graphics look very colorful and convincing. All the major characters have individual cinematics in a cartoony style, which befits the setting. Now this game won't win any prizes when it comes to the graphics, but it does the trick. Sound. It is with the sound where I'm impressed the most. Let me explain. The sound effects are all good, and most of the dialogue is spoken by voice actors who range from pretty decent to excellent. So nothing wrong there. It is with the soundtrack where Wasteland 3 truly shines. The developers picked an array of excellent songs, reminiscent of Sons of Anarchy, the TV series. The song Down in the Valley to Pray made me want to join the Rangers immediately, while the electro tune Little Vegas Bar gave a typical airy 80s vibe. Apart from some excellent pop and rock songs, there is a near perfect soundtrack composed by Mark Morgan, a veteran composer who worked on games like Fallout and Planescape Torment. Conclusion. The one word that comes to mind with Wasteland 3 is fun. It is a well thought out isometric RPG with a setting and storyline that doesn't take itself too seriously. In other words, just fun. And as I've said, the gameplay is a big improvement over the previous game. And while maybe not genre-changing original, it is all pretty good. Is this an instant classic like Fallout New Vegas? No. But in the post-apocalyptic RPG genre, it's still one of the best games out there at the moment. I give Wasteland 3 a score of 8 out of 10.